Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Winnie Litten. I've been a science teacher for 23 years, primarily honors biology and AP biology. And 5 years ago, I was able to have a SmartBoard in my classroom, and I'm telling you that it transformed what I was able to do with my students. Here are the 5 big ways that I use SMART in my classroom. I try to create dynamic content presentations. In my labs for setup, data, and conclusions, daily schedule and agenda. For my assessments, of course, I also have written assessments that go along with it. And for reviews, cumulative reviews at the end of the unit, but also embedded reviews throughout my presentations. So the way my classroom is set up, I have my agendas on the board. As soon as they walk in the room, they know what I expect because when the bell rings, we are good to go. Also, my students sit in pairs, and we call them bio buddies in my classroom. And so intermittently throughout my presentations, I stop, and one of the bio buddies needs to summarize the material, put it in their own words, or quiz one of their bio buddies, and we'll have more on that in just a minute. So let's talk about labs and how you can use them in the lab situation. First of all, it's so easy for me to just snap a picture and put it on my screen, and they can see the materials, also the way I want it to be returned, and I can talk about any concerns that I have, pull out a little tab about how I like things to be. This is a lab in the middle of our genetic engineering experiment, and so this was day 2. And I have a little link that you can see here that linked it to both the directions to the lab and their own pre-labs and conclusions that we can discuss. I could very easily pull out a little tab about the previous day's results that we can look at. Also, I have fewer student errors now that I have a SmartBoard because instead of me holding up a little 2 or 3 inch wide Petri dish, I have a 4-foot wide Petri dish that's up for all to see. And some of my classes have 40 in them, so everybody can see the directions that I'm giving them. So the small little markings on the side of the Petri dish are now larger. And again, we get out of the how do I do this, but what does this mean? That's where we get to spend most of our time. Here is a quick little demo I made on how they were to count the colonies on a Petri dish, just so we could see their transformational rate. We won't watch the whole thing, but I break it into pie-size pieces, pick up a pen and count, just a model for them what I wanted them to do in the classroom. This is one of the best things about SMART is that my SmartBoard is up, and thank goodness to the support of my district and Jane Mintz, our fearless leader, we have the 885 boards in many of our classrooms, and so I have a dual touch board, so I have 2 students up at a time putting in data, and that way we can see as it starts to build, and we can do our classroom averages, and they can see if something looks out of place and maybe they need to repeat one of theirs because it's not in the flow of the experiment. Learning how to use equipment, so wonderful. My micropipetter, it's expensive. I want to make sure they're using it correctly. I embed throughout my lessons little watch me buttons which link to other websites or to YouTube videos. And so it just makes it larger. And again, we can move beyond the mechanics of the lab to actually doing the lab. This was something generated by SMART. I am so grateful for it. Modeling gel electrophoresis, if you're familiar with that. In this process, you can sort DNA according to its size, and you can use this for DNA fingerprinting. We do it to make sure that we have cut the DNA and ligated the DNA properly. So what I'm modeling for you here is what they would be doing with their micropipetter and loading their gel. And then what you do is you turn on an electric current. So I'm modeling it here, and what you're seeing is the gel loading buffer moving through the gel, and you have a lapse time right up here in the top corner. And when they're doing gel electrophoresis, all they can actually see is the loading die, and it is assumed that the DNA is back here. And they can't visualize it yet, and we talk about staining in our classroom. We use acidium bromide to bind to the DNA. But still they can't see it, so I put it on a transilluminator, and then voila, we can see the banding pattern behind. So I can discuss this demo, and they have the comprehension of what they're going to be doing. So when we're looking at their actual results, which we pop up onto the SmartBoard, oh, look, I got that wonderful spinning wheel. I'm doing many things here. Here we go. So when I have their data up on the SmartBoard, we can jump to, again, the analysis so much quicker because they already know what they did, and we can get to the application level. Here is where I use my Smart Document Camera, maybe a quick demo I'm doing, and this is captured in real video feed, real time up on my SmartBoard. Also, not to hopefully gross anyone out, they're not chewing on their lunch right now, but kids are doing dissections in the class, and at different points they bring up organs and they can snap it right there. They know how to use my document camera, and it's up on the board, and you know, they're proud that their organ's up there, and it helps the other students to know what they should be looking for. So in summary, my Smart Labs, I use it for setup, pictures, and directions. I use it for demonstrations, for data collection, for links, and for student examples of work. Now let's talk about Smart Lessons. I like to have what I call an interest-catching image, an ICI right at the start of the lesson and embedded throughout, something to draw them in so that they want to be part of the discussions that we're having. And it's so easy to take one of those images and just add in a little tab about a map to further explain it, maybe bring in another topic. Here, this is through layering technique. As I'm talking, I can have different definitions coming up at different times. And let me tell you, when they're wondering what's going to come up on your board next and what's the next slide, again, you've got students that are interested, and if you have students who are interested, chances are there's going to be some learning going on. Here is a Venn diagram that I used a template from SMART and threw on my own words here to help them distinguish between their specific immune response and B and T cells. This is great. It's called an infinite cloner. You can take any object and do this, and I'm bringing out water molecules. And when we're discussing the properties of water and we talk about hydrogen bonding, sometimes they get a little bit confused. They confuse the bond, the polar covalent bond between a hydrogen and an oxygen molecule and a single water molecule with the hydrogen bonds that form between water molecules. So I have students come up to the board and start pulling out water molecules and drawing in their hydrogen bonds. And then I can also have them work with that to talk about how bound water interacts with different ions. Here, the water molecule, you've got that partial positive charge on the hydrogen. It's not going to be attracted to sodium this way, but they are up on my board spinning those water molecules around, and, you know, by the way, it's kind of fun. And then forming their hydrogen bonds there and how it might interact differently with a different type of ion. This allows me to get past the idea of what hydrogen bonding is, but to talk about those higher-end concepts like transpiration or why is water a good solvent. Here in an ecology lesson, but keeping with the theme of water, when I'm talking about the abundance of water in first world countries, when my children say to me, oh, Mom, we're out of water, they mean bottled water. But in other countries, through this, I'm just having one image disappear and another one come up. We can look at what it really means to be out of water. Again, I can throw in a little map to help solidify that concept. I put all my notebook lessons up on my school's web page so that students can access them as well to use for reviews. So in summary, my SMART lessons, I like to have interest-catching images. I like to have as much interactivity as I can, revealing and animations, links and demonstrations, and again, student work. Moving on to We Are Clickerlicious in my classroom. As you heard Kristen Stevens speak of earlier, I am grateful to have the XD clickers, as she was talking about. My students walk in the doors and they pick up their clickers as they go to their seats. They look to see, are we taking a quiz or a test? Are they logging in as themselves or onto some of my character lists? I'll talk about that in just a minute. SMART brings up John Hattie, who looked at over 8,000 different studies looking to see what really makes a difference in the classroom. And he actually came up with two conclusions. One was the relationship that the student has with the teacher, and the second one was formative assessment as contributing to student achievement. Now, diagnostic is what you're doing before you're starting to teach, and summative at the end. But with my formative assessment, I'm looking for little groups of understanding as I'm working through the lesson. And I believe that not checking for understanding along the way is like setting your sail for the shore and never adjusting for those tidal conditions or the wind conditions. And as educators, we need to be able to read our classroom and be able to make sure we're catching all of our students and bringing them along. So in my class, when they sign in, if it is a quiz or a test, they will sign in as themselves, their real ID that I can put into the gradebook. But if I'm checking for understanding in a lab or lesson, what is formative assessment, then they log into many of my different character lists. I have over 25 character lists. Some of them are student-generated, so it may be their favorite restaurants, their favorite color of crayon, movie quotes. So instead, when they're answering a question, it's not Johnny Hudak in second seat, third row, who doesn't feel that great about himself to begin with today, but they're Johnny Depp who's answering that question, so it's a safe way to respond. So as mentioned earlier, there's all types of questions, on the fly, instant questions, or what I really like are those thoughtful, embedded questions where you're really going to check for understanding. Again, unlimited choices here I can use different types of equations, words and phrases. My kids love that. And what's really pretty cool is the multiple answers possible, so there's more than one option. So just a few samples of different questions that I use in the classroom here. I took an image to catch their attention, and then I brought the question out on a tab. This is one when we were discussing pedigrees, and in this situation, I could ask them the question, and then they could tell me, was that a dominant trait, a recessive trait, or a sex-linked trait, and then we could work it out right there on the board. Smart has templates that you can use, so you don't have to create from scratch. And like she said about the homework, I want to encourage you, they can click in their answers. So I use them for diagnostics, formative, on the fly, as summative, and for teaching reflection. Oftentimes we think we're teaching the best lesson in the world, but then you throw in a question, you realize the majority of the students, if they don't get it, then we can adjust our teaching. Last but not least, I use them for compilations, and Smart is great about that, just dragging and dropping questions in from notebook lessons, from labs, from your clickers, so you can have a cumulative review. But my students sitting with their bio buddies to decide which one of these young ladies is going to be doing the reviewing, we like to do little things like play high card or answer the door or click dice to see odds or evens and who's going to be doing the reviewing. So Smart Exchange also has a lot of review lessons and games. And just to kind of speed things along, compilations, they're embedded, they're review games. Smart Exchange is a source, and try to make them fun and dynamic. I want to tell you, to be Smartalicious, you don't have to do everything over. Just start with one lab, one lesson, one activity, make it a little better. I encourage you to share your ideas with your colleagues. Maybe take turns developing lessons. And remember that your goal is to support student learning, achievement, and development. And I was really happy to speak with you today. So I'm all done.